The Galactic Council chambers had never seen such unanimity.
Representatives from 14 different species, their varied forms creating a tapestry of scales, fur, chitin, and crystalline structures, all nodded in agreement as the final vote was cast. The holographic display showed the results in stark clarity: 847 votes in favor, 0 against, 0 abstentions. For the first time in galactic history, every single member world had agreed on something.
War against humanity. Ambassador Kethvar of the Zephyrian Empire stood tall, his forearms gesturing dramatically as he addressed the assembly.
His blue-scaled hide shimmered under the chamber's artificial suns, and his 3 eyes blazed with righteous fury. "The humans have gone too far," he declared, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of military tradition. "Their expansion must be stopped before they consume everything we hold dear."
The evidence was overwhelming, or so it seemed to the assembled delegates. Humanity had spread across 47 star systems in less than 200 years since first achieving faster-than-light travel.
Their colonies dotted the galaxy's outer rim like a rash, each one a testament to their relentless hunger for new worlds. They built where others deemed construction impossible, thrived in environments that would kill most species, and, worst of all, they did it all with that insufferable optimism that made other races' diplomatic corps break out in stress rashes. General Fakmar of the Hegemony Defense Force, a massive creature whose rocky exterior made him look like a walking mountain, rumbled his agreement.
"My scouts report that humans have established mining operations on 17 different worlds that we classified as uninhabitable. They're strip mining asteroids, harvesting gas giants, and somehow making frozen hellscapes bloom with agriculture. At this rate, they'll have consumed half the galaxy's resources within a millennium." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly.
The Crystalline Collective's representative, a being of living diamond named Resonance of Truth, chimed in with a sound like wind through crystal caves.
"Their technological advancement is unprecedented.
In 2 centuries, they've gone from primitive chemical rockets to faster-than-light capable vessels that rival our own designs.
Their weapons technology."
The crystal being paused, its faceted surface reflecting the chamber's light in worried patterns. "Their weapons technology surpasses anything we've seen from a species so young."
The fear was palpable.
Every civilization in the galaxy had taken millennia to reach the stars, cautiously expanding over thousands of years, carefully managing resources, and maintaining the delicate balance that kept galactic civilization stable. Humanity had burst onto the scene like a supernova, bright, violent, and impossible to ignore. Ambassador Silkthread of the Arachnoid Confederacy clicked her mandibles nervously as she added her species' concerns.
"They reproduce at an alarming rate. Each human world reports population growth that would strain our most fertile colonies. They're breeding faster than plague locusts and spreading just as quickly."
The final speaker was perhaps the most disturbing of all. Elder Mindweaver of the Psion Collective rarely spoke in council, preferring to communicate through the subtle telepathic networks that connected all psychic species. When it did speak aloud, its voice carried the weight of 1,000 linked minds. "We have attempted to read their thoughts, to understand their motivations," the ethereal being said, its translucent form flickering like heat shimmer.
"What we found troubles us. They do not think like other species. Where we see obstacles, they see challenges. Where we see limits, they see suggestions. Where we see the impossible, they see Tuesday."
A chill ran through the assembly at those words. The Psion Collective had been the galaxy's mediators for centuries, capable of understanding any species' mental patterns and finding common ground between the most disparate civilizations.
If they couldn't comprehend humanity's thought processes, what hope did anyone else have? Kethvar raised his primary arm for silence. "The motion has been carried unanimously. As of this moment, humanity is declared a threat to galactic stability and civilization itself. All member worlds are authorized to take whatever action is necessary to contain this menace before it spreads further. The announcement would be transmitted to every corner of the galaxy within hours.
Fleet commanders would receive their orders, armies would mobilize, and the greatest military alliance in galactic history would move as one against a single species that had been among the stars for less than 3 centuries. On Earth, in the modest offices of the Human Colonial Administration, Director Sarah Chen received the official declaration of war with the kind of calm that came from years of dealing with bureaucratic disasters. She read through the document twice, made notes in the margins, and, then, did something that would have baffled the Galactic Council if they had witnessed it.
She smiled.
Marcus, she called to her assistant, a young man who looked barely old enough to have graduated from university.
Get me Admiral Rodriguez on the priority channel. And, Marcus? Start pulling up the files from the Historical Warfare Analysis Division. All of them. Marcus looked confused. Ma'am, shouldn't we be contacting the colonies? Warning them about the incoming fleets? Chen's smile widened.
Oh, we will. But, first, we need to remind ourselves of something important. You see, Marcus, this isn't the first time in human history that the entire world has declared war on us. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes taking on a distant look. The thing about humans, Marcus, is that we've been practicing this for millennia.
Every time we thought we'd found a good enemy, we'd fight them until we either destroyed them or made them our friends.
When we ran out of external enemies, we fought each other. When we ran out of countries to fight, we fought over ideas.
When we ran out of ideas to fight over, we fought over sports teams.
She stood up and walked to the window, gazing out at the sprawling cityscape that stretched to the horizon.
Do you know what the galaxy's greatest mistake was, Marcus?
The young man shook his head, still trying to process the casual way his boss was handling a declaration of war from every advanced civilization in known space. They assumed that because we're young, we're inexperienced. They looked at our 200 years in space and thought we were children playing with toys we didn't understand. Chen turned back to him, and Marcus was surprised to see that her smile had taken on an edge that made him think of ancient predators. What they failed to consider is that we spent the previous 10,000 years perfecting the art of war against our own species.
We didn't learn to fight aliens, Marcus. We learned to fight humans.
And humans, as it turns out, are the most dangerous, unpredictable, and ruthlessly creative opponents in the galaxy. The priority channel crackled to life, and Admiral Rodriguez's weathered face appeared on the main screen. His expression was grim, but Chen could see the familiar gleam in his eyes that she remembered from their academy days.
Director Chen, I assume you've seen the declaration?
I have, Admiral.
What's our fleet status? All colonial defense forces are at full readiness.
The deep space monitoring stations picked up the first enemy fleet movements about an hour ago. They're coming at us from 14 different vectors, and preliminary estimates suggest we're looking at over 10,000 vessels.
Chen nodded calmly. And our forces? Rodriguez's grin was predatory. Counting civilian vessels that can be armed?
About 3,000 ships.
We're outnumbered more than 3 to 1. Excellent, Chen said, and meant it. Those are practically even odds for us. Begin implementation of Protocol 7. Marcus watched in fascination as the Admiral's expression shifted from grim determination to something approaching glee. Protocol 7? Ma'am, are you sure? That's going to make them very angry. Marcus, Chen said patiently, they've already declared war on every human being in the galaxy. I'm not particularly concerned about making them angrier.
She turned back to Rodriguez.
How long until first contact? Enemy fleets will reach our outer colonies in approximately 72 hours.
The main force targeting Earth will arrive in 96 hours.
Perfect. That gives us time to prepare the welcome committee.
Chen's smile had taken on a quality that made Marcus think of ancient human legends about predators that smiled before they struck. Admiral, please send a message to all colonial administrators and fleet commanders. Tell them that the galaxy has just made the same mistake that every enemy in human history has made.
Which mistake is that, ma'am?
Chen's eyes gleamed with the accumulated wisdom of a species that had clawed its way to the top of its food chain through cunning, courage, and an absolute refusal to give up when the odds were against them. They assumed that just because we're outnumbered, we're going to lose. As the transmission ended and the machinery of human civilization began to shift into its wartime configuration, Chen pulled up the historical files that Marcus had requested. The documents told the story of a species that had never backed down from a fight, never surrendered when victory seemed impossible, and never failed to find a way to turn their enemies' strengths against them. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity had never lost a war that mattered. They were about to discover that being young didn't mean being weak, and that sometimes the most dangerous opponent is the one who has nothing left to lose and everything to prove. In exactly 96 hours, the greatest military force in galactic history would arrive at Earth, expecting to find a frightened species begging for mercy. Instead, they would find something that no alien civilization had ever encountered before, a species that considered overwhelming odds to be a personal challenge, and had spent its entire evolutionary history proving that the impossible was just another word for Tuesday. The first shots of the Galactic War were fired at Kepler 442b, a human agricultural colony that the aliens had designated as a soft target. The Zephyrian Third Fleet, consisting of 200 vessels including their flagship dreadnought Stellar Dominance, had approached the system expecting to find frightened farmers and, maybe a handful of outdated patrol ships. What they found instead was the most audacious military trap in recorded history. Fleet Commander Zexthal had been conducting space battles for over 3 centuries. He had fought in the Hegemony Wars, crushed the Silicon Uprising, and led the victorious assault on the rogue AI Collective. His tactical brilliance was legendary, his ship's weapon systems could crack a planet's crust, and his confidence in the superiority of Zephyrian military doctrine was absolute. That confidence lasted exactly 17 minutes after entering the Kepler 442 system. The human colony appeared defenseless from long-range scans. A few orbital platforms, some civilian traffic, and what looked like a single outdated destroyer guarding the space lanes. Zexthal ordered his fleet into a standard intimidation formation, expecting the humans to surrender immediately once they saw the overwhelming force arrayed against them.
Instead, the single human destroyer broadcast a message on all frequencies.
The image that appeared on his command screen showed a woman in a simple colonial defense uniform, her brown hair tied back in a practical ponytail, her expression completely calm. "Attention Zephyrian Fleet, this is Captain Maria Santos of the human colonial defense ship Indomitable.
You are in violation of human territorial space. You have 30 seconds to reverse course and leave this system, or we will be forced to take defensive action." Zexthal's 3 eyes blinked in astonishment.
A single human ship, barely the size of his flagship shuttle bay, was threatening a fleet of 200 vessels.
The audacity was so incredible that he almost laughed. Instead, he opened a return channel. "Human Captain Santos, I am Fleet Commander Zexthal of the Zephyrian Empire.
You are speaking to the commander of 200 warships, including 12 battlecruisers and a dreadnought-class vessel capable of sterilizing your entire world.
Surrender immediately and your people will be treated with mercy." Captain Santos checked her chronometer. 25 seconds, Commander. I suggest you start turning around. The fleet commander's confusion was turning to irritation. "Captain, you have 1 ship. I have 200. Perhaps you should reconsider your mathematics."
Actually, Santos said with a smile that reminded Zexthal uncomfortably of the predatory grins found on Terran wildlife documentaries, "I think your mathematics might be a little off. You see, you're not fighting 1 ship, Commander. You're fighting 1 system. And this system has been preparing for this conversation for quite some time." The countdown reached 0, and the trap was sprung. What Zexthal had mistaken for civilian orbital platforms suddenly unfolded like mechanical flowers, revealing massive railgun installations that had been disguised as cargo containers. The outdated destroyer split apart into 17 smaller vessels that had been docked together to create the illusion of a single ship. And, from the planet's moon, previously hidden behind a sophisticated holographic projection, emerged the human battle group that had been waiting in complete radio silence for 72 hours. But the real surprise wasn't the ships or the guns. It was what happened next. Every piece of debris in the system suddenly came alive. Asteroids that had been slowly drifting in orbit for millions of years fired thrusters and revealed themselves to be camouflaged weapons platforms. Seemingly innocent communication satellites extended particle beam arrays. Even the space junk floating around the colony's shipping lanes turned out to be remotely operated mines, disguised to look like discarded cargo containers. In the span of 30 seconds, the Zephyrian Third Fleet found itself in the middle of the most comprehensive killing field ever constructed. They were surrounded, outgunned, and completely outmaneuvered by an enemy that had spent months turning an entire star system into a weapon. Zexthal's tactical display lit up like a festival celebration as hundreds of targeting solutions appeared on his screens.
His weapons officer, a competent female named Sitara, stared at the readings in disbelief. "Sir, I'm counting over 400 independent weapon systems.
They've turned the entire system into a fortress." The fleet commander's mind raced, trying to understand how the humans had accomplished this without being detected. His long-range sensors had shown nothing unusual about the system. His intelligence reports had indicated minimal defenses. Every piece of data had suggested an easy victory against a poorly defended agricultural world. "Sir," his communications officer announced, "the humans are broadcasting again." Captain Santos reappeared on the main screen, but she was no longer alone. Standing behind her were representatives from every human colony in the sector, their faces showing the same calm confidence that was beginning to unnerve Zexthal more than any amount of screaming or threats would have. "Commander Zexthal," Santos said pleasantly, "you're probably wondering how we managed to prepare such an elaborate welcome for you.
The answer is actually quite simple. You see, humans have this saying, 'Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.' Well, we've been studying galactic history for 200 years now, and we noticed a pattern."
One of the humans behind her, an elderly man with graying hair and the insignia of a colonial administrator, stepped forward. Every time a younger species emerges onto the galactic stage, the established civilizations eventually decide they're a threat.
The pattern is remarkably consistent. First comes economic pressure, then diplomatic isolation, and finally military action.
A third human, this one wearing the uniform of what Zexthal recognized as a human intelligence officer, added her own contribution. "So we decided to do something that apparently no other species has ever tried. We prepared for the inevitable. Every human colony has been constructing defensive systems for the past 50 years. Every asteroid belt has been surveyed and weaponized. Every trade route has been mapped and rigged." Captain Santos smiled that predatory smile again. "But the real trick, Commander, wasn't hiding our defenses from your sensors. The real trick was making you think you were attacking a soft target. You see, Kepler 442b isn't just an agricultural colony. It's the test site for every experimental weapons system that human engineers have developed in the past decade. We've been hoping someone would give us an excuse to field test them." The implications hit Zexthal like a physical blow. This hadn't been a surprise attack on an unprepared colony. This had been a carefully orchestrated invitation to walk into a trap. The humans had wanted the Galactic Council to declare war. They had been counting on it. "You're insane," he whispered. "No, Commander," Santos replied.
"We're human."
"There's a difference, though I understand the confusion is common among other species." The first shots came from the disguised asteroid platforms, massive railgun slugs that moved at significant fractions of light speed.
The Zephyrian ship's shields, designed to deflect energy weapons and slow missiles, were useless against solid projectiles moving at relativistic velocities.
3 cruisers simply disintegrated as the slugs passed through them like bullets through tissue paper. Zexthal ordered his fleet to return fire, and the spacer on Kepler 442b erupted in a light show that could be seen from neighboring star systems. Particle beams, plasma cannons, and fusion missiles filled the void between the worlds, creating a deadly aurora that danced among the stars.
But the humans had planned for this too.
Instead of trying to match the aliens' firepower directly, they had created a defensive strategy that played to their species' unique strengths. While the Zephyrian fleet concentrated their fire on the obvious targets, human strike teams were already inside their ships. The space junk that had revealed itself to be mines hadn't just been weapons. Some of them had been personnel carriers, disguised to look like debris until they could attach themselves to alien hulls. Human marines, wearing powered armor that let them survive in hard vacuum, were cutting their way into Zephyrian vessels and turning the battle into the kind of close-quarters combat that humans had been perfecting for millennia. The aliens' technological advantage meant nothing in the cramped corridors of their own ships, where humans could use their natural aggression, adaptability, and tactical creativity to devastating effect. Zephyrian warriors who had trained for centuries in formal combat found themselves facing opponents who fought like demons, used their own ship's systems against them, and seemed to treat impossible odds as a personal challenge. Within an hour, the Zephyrian Third Fleet had been reduced to floating wreckage and a handful of severely damaged ships trying desperately to escape the system. Of the original 200 vessels, only 37 managed to jump to hyperspace. The rest were either destroyed or captured, their crews either dead or prisoners of a species that treated war like a particularly violent sport. Commander Zexthal, bleeding from multiple wounds and, trapped in the shattered remains of his flagship's bridge, found himself staring at Captain Santos as she led a human boarding party onto his vessel. She moved through the wreckage with the casual confidence of someone inspecting a construction project, occasionally stopping to check on wounded Zephyrians or to examine some piece of alien technology that had caught her interest. Why, he asked weakly as human medics began treating his injuries with a professional competence that somehow made their victory even more disturbing.
Why are you helping us? We came here to destroy you.
Santos knelt beside him, her expression showing genuine concern for his wounds despite the fact that he had been trying to kill her just minutes before. Because, Commander, humans have learned something over the years that apparently the rest of the galaxy hasn't figured out yet.
The point of war isn't to destroy your enemies. The point is to convince them to stop being your enemies.
She stood up and gestured to the human marines who were helping wounded Zephyrians to the medical bays.
Every one of your people who survives today is going to go back to the Galactic Council with a story. They're going to tell their superiors that humans don't fight the way other species fight.
They're going to report that we're not interested in conquest or domination or any of the things that motivate most civilizations. We're interested in something much more dangerous.
Zexthal's vision was starting to blur from blood loss, but he managed to ask, "What's that?"
Captain Santos' smile was gentle now, almost sad. "We're interested in making friends, Commander.
Whether you want to be friends or not."
The news of the Kepler 442b disaster spread through the galactic communication networks like a virus. Within hours, every military commander in the Alliance was demanding explanations for how a single human colony had destroyed an entire Zephyrian fleet. Within days, the survivors' reports had reached the highest levels of government on every member world, and the comfortable assumptions that had led to the war declaration were crumbling like ancient foundations in an earthquake. General Fakmar of the Hegemony Defense Force stood in his command center on the fortress world of Granite Prime, staring at tactical displays that showed something unprecedented in galactic military history. Of the 14 fleets that had been dispatched to crush humanity's colonial holdings, only 6 were still reporting regular contact. 3 had been completely destroyed, 2 had suffered catastrophic losses and were limping back to base, and 3 more had simply vanished without a trace.
The humans hadn't just defended themselves. They had gone on the offensive.
"Sir," reported his aide, a young hegemony officer whose stone-like features showed the stress fractures that indicated extreme anxiety in his species.
"We've received another transmission from the Human Colonial Defense Force. It's addressed to you personally."
Fakmar's massive form rumbled with the subsonic vibrations that served as sighs for his people. He had been dreading this moment since the reports from Kepler 442b had arrived.
"Display it." The holographic projector activated, revealing the image of a human female wearing the blue and silver uniform of what intelligence reports identified as the Human Colonial Defense Force. She appeared to be standing on the bridge of a starship, with displays showing the tactical situation in several star systems visible behind her. "General Fakmar," the woman said with the kind of polite formality that made the general's rocky hide crawl with premonition. "My name is Admiral Elena Vasquez, Commanding Officer of the Human Colonial Defense Force.
I understand that you've been having some difficulties with your recent military operations, and I thought it might be helpful if we had a conversation." The transmission paused, as if the admiral were giving the general time to absorb this opening statement. Fakmar found himself impressed despite his growing alarm. Most species, when winning a conflict, either gloated about their victories or made formal demands for surrender. The humans seemed to be treating this like a business negotiation. "I want to begin," Admiral Vasquez continued, "by expressing my sincere regret for the losses your forces have sustained. War is a terrible thing, General, and I want you to know that we take no pleasure in the destruction of life, even when that destruction is forced upon us by circumstances beyond our control." The general's aide made a grinding sound that indicated confusion.
"Sir, is she apologizing for winning?"
Fakmar didn't answer, because he was beginning to understand something that chilled his massive frame to its mineral core.
The human admiral wasn't apologizing for winning.
She was apologizing for what she was about to do next. However, Vasquez continued, her tone remaining pleasantly conversational, I think it's important that we discuss the current tactical situation with complete honesty. You see, General, while your fleets have been attacking our colonies, we've been conducting what our military doctrine calls a strategic reconnaissance in force of your home systems. The displays behind the Admiral shifted, showing star charts that made Thokmar's processing centers freeze in horror. The map showed the locations of every major hegemony military installation, every shipyard, every fortress world, and every strategic resource depot. But, more than that, they showed the current positions of human fleet elements that had somehow penetrated to the very heart of hegemony space without being detected. Our intelligence services have been studying galactic military doctrine for 200 years, the Admiral explained with the patient tone of a teacher addressing a slow student. We've noticed that most species follow a very predictable pattern when conducting military operations. You mass your fleets, identify your targets, and then proceed to attack in a straightforward manner that prioritizes overwhelming force over tactical innovation. The star chart shifted again, and Thokmar realized with growing horror that the human fleet positions weren't random. They were positioned to strike at every critical point in hegemony infrastructure simultaneously. If they attacked now, they could cripple his civilization's ability to wage war within a matter of hours. This approach, Vasquez continued, has the advantage of being reliable and easy to coordinate among multiple species with different tactical philosophies. It also has the disadvantage of being completely predictable to anyone who bothers to study your historical military campaigns. The general's aide was making rapid calculations on his tactical computer, and the results were becoming more alarming by the second. Sir, if their fleet positions are accurate, they could destroy 70% of our industrial capacity before we could respond. Our home defense fleets are positioned to repel attacks from the galactic rim, not from inside our own territory. Admiral Vasquez seemed to hear his comment, despite the fact that this was supposed to be a one-way transmission. Your aide is correct, General. We could cripple your war-making capacity quite easily. But that would be counterproductive to our long-term goals. You see, we're not interested in destroying the hegemony. We're interested in something that I suspect will be much more disturbing to your leadership. The display changed one final time, showing what looked like a formal document with signatures from multiple human officials. What you're looking at, General, is a proposed mutual defense treaty between the Human Colonial Administration and the Hegemony Defense Force. We're offering a formal military alliance. The silence in the command center was so complete that Thokmar could hear the subtle harmonics of the fortress world's artificial gravity generators. His aide's tactical computer had stopped calculating, as if the machine itself were too stunned to process what it was seeing. I understand that this might come as something of a surprise, the Admiral continued with what sounded like genuine sympathy. After all, we've been shooting at each other for the past several weeks. But humans have discovered over the centuries that the best way to end a war is not to defeat your enemies, but to convince them that they would rather be your allies. She gestured to the tactical displays behind her, which now showed the locations of the other galactic fleets that were presumably still trying to attack human colonies. As we speak, similar conversations are taking place with the commanders of every other fleet in this alliance. We're offering each of them the same choice we're offering you: continue fighting a war that you cannot win, or join us in building something that the galaxy has never seen before. General Thokmar found his voice, though it came out as more of a rumble than actual speech. What are you proposing? A true galactic alliance, General. Not the kind of loose confederation that currently exists, where species cooperate only when it's convenient and profitable. We're talking about a military and economic partnership that would make every member civilization stronger, safer, and more prosperous than they could ever be alone. The Admiral's expression became more serious, and Thokmar realized that he was about to hear the real reason for this conversation. You see, General, while the current galactic powers have been focused on containing humanity, we've been looking beyond the galaxy's borders. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected evidence of something that should concern every intelligent species in local space. The display shifted to show long-range sensor readings that made Thokmar's mineral heart skip several beats. The signatures were unmistakable: a massive fleet of unknown vessels approaching from intergalactic space, their energy signatures unlike anything in the databases of any known civilization. We estimate that this fleet will reach the galaxy's outer rim in approximately 18 months, Vasquez said quietly. Based on their approach vector and speed, we believe they represent a species with technology significantly more advanced than anything currently available to galactic civilization. Whether they're explorers, refugees, or conquerors, we don't know. What we do know is that when they arrive, the galaxy will need to present a united front. The implications hit Thokmar like a meteor impact. The humans hadn't just been defending themselves from the Galactic Alliance. They had been preparing for a threat that none of the established civilizations had even detected. While everyone else had been focused on the immediate political situation, humanity had been thinking on a scale that encompassed potential threats from beyond known space. "The choice is yours, General," Admiral Vasquez concluded. "You can continue fighting a war against a species that doesn't want to be your enemy, or you can join us in preparing for a threat that could endanger every form of life we know. But, I should mention that regardless of your decision, we will be implementing our defensive preparations according to our own timeline. The only question is whether the hegemony will be part of that defense, or a casualty of it." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. General Thokmar's aide was the first to speak. "Sir, what are your orders?" The general looked at the tactical display showing human fleet positions throughout hegemony space, then, at the long-range sensor readings showing the approaching unknown fleet. The mathematics were simple enough that even a civilian could understand them. Humanity had outmaneuvered, outfought, and outthought every military force in the Galactic Alliance. They had demonstrated capabilities that suggested their technology was generations ahead of anything the established civilizations possessed. And now they were offering to share that technology in preparation for a threat that could destroy everyone. The choice, when viewed objectively, wasn't really a choice at all. "Signal the fleet," Thokmar rumbled. "Stand down from combat operations and withdraw to defensive positions around our core worlds. Then, open a priority channel to Hegemony High Command. Tell them." He paused, trying to find words for a situation that no military manual had ever covered. "Tell them that the humans want to talk. And, tell them that I recommend we listen very carefully to what they have to say." As the orders went out and the machinery of the hegemony military began the complex process of shifting from war to negotiation, General Thokmar found himself thinking about the human admiral's words. The galaxy was about to change in ways that no one could predict, and the species that everyone had thought was the greatest threat to galactic stability might actually be its only hope for survival. 6 months later, when the new Galactic Defense Force held its first joint training exercises with human, Zephyrian, hegemony, and 12 other species fleets working in perfect coordination, Thokmar would realize that the humans had been right about something else. The best way to end a war wasn't to defeat your enemies. It was to turn them into friends who were eager to fight beside you when something really dangerous showed up at the door. The galaxy had declared war on humanity, expecting to crush a young and inexperienced species. Instead, they had awakened something that would transform galactic civilization forever, a species that treated the impossible as a personal challenge and viewed every enemy as a potential ally who just needed the right motivation to switch sides. When the unknown fleet finally arrived at the galaxy's borders, they would find themselves facing not a collection of squabbling civilizations, but a unified force that combined the best technologies, tactics, and strategies of every species in known space, coordinated by a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history learning how to turn hopeless situations into unexpected victories. The invaders, whoever they were about to learn the same lesson that the Galactic Council had learned: humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their numbers. It was their absolute refusal to accept defeat, and their supernatural ability to convince their enemies that they'd rather be friends instead.